Good afternoon, I'm Savannah Kelly. Welcome to APTN National News. Monday, Justin Trudeau announced he will step down as leader of the Liberal Party. With it searching for a new leader and Canada preparing for a possible spring federal election, the Federation of Sovereign Indigenous Nations says the next leader must prioritize First Nations issues. Yesterday, the FSIN urged possible leadership candidates to acknowledge their responsibility to First Nations. This includes taking action on issues affecting inherent rights and treaty rights, child welfare, economic development, language and cultural preservation, MMIWG, and 2S LGBTQI++. The FSIN called for a leader capable of delivering on the promises of reconciliation. FSIN Chief Bobby Cameron said in a press release, reconciliation is not a one-time initiative, but a continuous process. He also stated that inherent and treaty rights implementation and protection remain the FSIN's top priorities. Indigenous leadership in Manitoba is reacting to Justin Trudeau's resignation as Prime Minister, and as Sierra Bettens reports, they're calling on all federal party leaders to prioritize reconciliation. Here's more.
In his 29 years as president of the Manitoba Métis Federation, David Chartrand has met with many prime ministers. But when it came to supporting Red River Métis, Chartrand says Justin Trudeau exceeded the rest.
The reconciliation strategy is good for Canada, it's good for Indigenous people, and it's good for the future. So without doubt, I think Trudeau has proven that through the reconciliation model.
On Monday, Trudeau resigned from his post as Prime Minister of Canada. In a Tuesday interview with APTN, Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs, Acting Grand Chief Betsy Kennedy, commended Trudeau for his commitments to reconciliation.
He had done so much for the contribution to First Nations, establishing the missing and murdered women file and the call to justice.
At the same time, she says the Trudeau government failed to deliver on some priorities for First Nations, including outstanding land claims.
Especially our treaty and our treaty lands we've been trying to do that for over 20 years, and that still has not been done. And the infrastructure, especially our water, many of our First Nations are still under water advisory.
Chartrand says advancing self-government for the Red River Métis and supporting the MMF's first-time home purchase program are among Trudeau's major achievements, as the torch is passed on to a new Liberal leader and potentially a new Prime Minister. Kennedy and Chartrand hope Canada's next leader stays committed to change.
I hope that reconciliation is still in the forefront, no matter what party's in play. I think it's proven itself that it is very successful. It's changed, as I said, tens of thousands of people's lives, Indigenous people, and that it shows that if you include the Indigenous people in the beginning, that there's less controversy, there's less fighting, there's less court cases that need to go on.
For now, Parliament has been prorogued until March 24th, and Trudeau will remain the leader of the Federal Liberal Party until a replacement is chosen. Sierra Bettens, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
More reaction out of BC today as leaders are addressing the resignation of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. APTN's Tina House has this story.
I cannot be the one to carry the Liberal standard into the next election.
Just one day after the Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, announced his resignation, Premier of British Columbia David Eby held a press conference in Vancouver.
I'd like to just open by thanking Prime Minister Trudeau for his service to Canada over his time as Prime Minister. Without doubt, there were moments of frustration that I'm sure went in both directions, but we got some big things done together. Childcare, he got the country through a global pandemic, and there's a big shift for him and for his family. I want to wish them luck with their next steps.
However, Grand Chief Stuart Phillip had his own thoughts on his sudden resignation.
I don't think there's any question that it was long overdue. I thought the Prime Minister was characteristically not thinking of the best interests of Canada. Rather, he was catering to his own narcissistic, self-absorbed self, and waited until the last minute. His legacy with our people is very, very tragic. He, in spite of his promises in 2015 that he was going to address the issue of missing and murdered Indigenous women and provide resources, that never happened.
Grand Chief also points to the crisis of many First Nations who still do not have clean drinking water, and says that sadly with Trudeau pro-Rogan government, it will kill the bill that would have ensured clean drinking water for First Nations across Canada. Philip also says his legacy will also include the mistreatment of women.
I have no respect for the Prime Minister, given his commitment to being a champion of women's rights when he first was elected in 2015. When I think of how horribly he treated Jody Wilson-Raybould, that challenged him over the unethical, underhanded situation with NC Lavalin.
And with Trudeau stepping down, we asked Premier Eby if this will affect their plan to advance reconciliation.
I do certainly recognize that there are going to be some impacts on our initiatives in relation to our partnership with Indigenous people in the province as a result of the resignation of the Prime Minister, but my hope is that that work will be able to continue regardless of who is sitting in the chair of Prime Minister, and just to make sure that we're doing that critically important work.
I've been quite public about encouraging our people, particularly women, to run for public office. We need to populate those, legislative centers of decision-making if we hope to change our world.
Parliament will be called back in session in March. Tina House, APTN National News, Vancouver.
The Chiefs of Ontario and the Anishinaabe-Aski Nation, or NAN, say they are negotiating their own final agreement with Canada to reform the First Nations Child and Family Services system. The agreement would only apply to First Nations in Ontario. Sierra Bettens has more.
In 2016, the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal ordered Canada to stop discriminatory practices and reform the First Nations CFS program. In July, the Chiefs of Ontario and NAN accepted the final agreement on the long-term reform of the First Nations Child and Family Services program. The program aims to reduce the number of First Nations children in care and help them stay connected to their community, family, and culture. Under that agreement, Canada would have provided $47.8 billion over 10 years to support a national reformed First Nations CFS program. However, that proposal excluded off-reserve First Nation children. Then, in October, a resolution to support the agreement was voted down at a special meeting in Calgary by a majority of the Assembly of First Nations. In a statement, NAN Grand Chief Elvin Fiddler said that while the absence of a national agreement is unfortunate, they're committed to reforming child welfare services for nations in Ontario. Sierra Bettens, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
Megan Gallagher was last seen alive in 2020 in Saskatoon. Her body was found 2 years later near St. Louis, Saskatchewan. After 22 months of waiting for evidence copies, 2 of the accused in her case have now begun their trial. Yesterday marked the start of a long trial for Cheyenne Petitus and Summer Sky Henry. Both women are on trial at Court of King's Bench in Saskatoon for first-degree murder in connection with Gallagher's death. Both have pled not guilty. Petitus and Henry are among 9 people facing various charges in connection with the case. Justice Richard Daniluk called the 22-month wait for this trial ridiculous and warned the Crown and defense lawyers to be better prepared to avoid unconstitutional delays. The trial is set for 39 days. A publication ban now prevents reporting on any evidence from the trial. We're always looking for feedback or story ideas from you. Here's how you can continue the conversation. If you have a story you want to share, send us an email to news@aptn.ca. To read and watch our stories, go to aptnnews.ca. You can find us online on your favorite social media sites, including TikTok, YouTube, LinkedIn, and X. Follow APTN News to join the conversation and see our latest stories. We need to take a short break. Coming up, we'll tell you about a 17-year-old hockey player who made his mark at the 2025 World Juniors. Welcome back to APTN National News. An update to a story we've been following about LeMay Forest on the outskirts of Winnipeg. It's privately owned land, but a sacred fire has been set up there since Boxing Day after the owner began cutting down trees. Both residents and some from the Indigenous community set up camp because they want to protect the land. It's been home to traditional ceremonial grounds for over 3 decades. Today, the planner of Toshell Development Group tried to access the land. Sierra Bettens is on location and joins us live. Sierra, can you set the scene for us? What's happening right now?
So we're near LeMay Forest, where land defenders and members of the Coalition to Save the LeMay Forest are stationed. Earlier, the planner with Toco Developments, John Winthrop, came by first with a truck and then with a bobcat in an effort to try to access the land. But ultimately, they turned away. Then we heard from City Councillor Russ Wyatt, who announced that the city is looking at potentially expropriating the land of LeMay Forest in an effort to save the forest. But planner John Winthrop says the developer is adamant that they're going to continue to remove the trees. We'll have a full story for you this evening. Back to you in studio.
Thank you, Sierra. The World Junior Hockey Championship wrapped up Sunday in Ottawa. All eyes were on Yukon hockey star Gavin McKenna, who many hoped would lead Team Canada to victory. However, it was Team USA that ultimately took home gold. But as Sarah Connors tells us, there's always hope for next year.
Tired Finns on the ice. Here's McKenna, loose in front. Good stop, rebound, score!
Yukon hockey sensation Gavin McKenna had high hopes for the 2025 World Juniors. The 17-year-old Chondakwitchin citizen from Whitehorse was the youngest player chosen to play on Team Canada's roster. But the goal McKenna scored in his first game against Finland would be his last. Eventually, Team Canada fell 4-3 to Czechia in the quarterfinals.
I wish we could have done more for the fans and the people of Canada. It sucks we had to go out this way.
Perhaps the defeat was even more punishing as the championship was held in the nation's capital. This also marks the second straight year Canada has been eliminated in the quarterfinals.
I hate to say it, but there's always next year, so I wish we could have got it done this year, but I don't know. Gotta look at the positives, I guess.
I think he's quite heartbroken. All the boys are completely heartbroken. That's not what anybody wanted.
McKenna's parents say it was a disappointing defeat, but they're overjoyed at their son's incredible accomplishments.
For him to be able to go out there and be such a force every single shift that he was on the ice, and to earn the more ice time and all that kind of stuff, yeah, he made us so proud.
They're hopeful their son's experience at the World Juniors will ultimately benefit him in the long run.
I think he'll come off of this tournament and probably be a better hockey player. I think he's going to be driven. He's probably going to be, he's going to want to prove himself even more. And, for this season, it's for his WHL team, the Medicine Hat Tigers, to win a championship and ultimately go to the Memorial Cup.
McKenna is one of 9 players eligible to return to Team Canada next year. The 2026 World Juniors will take place in St. Paul, Minnesota. Sarah Connors, APTN National News, Whitehorse.
Culture can be woven into the fabrics of generations, or in this case, it can be sewn into a pattern of colorful beadwork. As beading becomes more and more popular, the art is being taken up by some as forms of therapy. And as CTV's Alexandra Hollick shows us, it's also helping people reclaim their identity and tie in their ancestral teachings.
Stitch by stitch, Lorraine Seymour sews a string of carefully selected colorful beads that will soon adorn her latest pair of moccasins.
I probably put in about 30 hours on these things, and I did a lot of healing and reflecting on why I picked certain colors.
Seymour, who also goes by Wasamuk, is one of more than 300 participants in the Manitoba Museum's first ever beadathon. As an Indigenous researcher, her work threads a connection between beading and healing.
It always has been a form of healing, and like even if you pick certain colors, if you're working through, what I discovered in my research is red is a form. A lot of people pick red when they're working through things. A lot of people pick purple when they're wanting to heal from addictions.
The practice spans centuries, with patterns and designs evolving over time. However, the community aspect remains constant.
I feel like beading is something that has kept us together for hundreds of thousands of years.
Though there's variation in how the tradition is passed on.
I actually learned from my mom. She grew up in the foster care system here in the city, actually, so she had to do a little bit of reconnecting herself. So when she had my brother and I, she took it upon herself to teach us all of these different parts of our culture and ensure that we knew who we are.
Knowing yourself and where you come from is something that stuck with Beadathon co-organizer Tashina Hool-Schloop.
I really wanted it to be like an opportunity to support artists and be a part of a community and gather together and bead together.
We all have a desire to get to that zone, to create and design something. And whatever that design is connected to, I believe that ancestors are also here helping us.
Sowing a beaded path toward resilience and reclamation. Alexandra Hollig, CTV News, Winnipeg.
We now want to tell you about this week's web poll question. Should First Nations that were underfunded for housing by the federal government be compensated? Yes, no, or unsure. You can go to our website aptnnews.ca to cast your ballot. We need to take one more quick break, but we still have plenty more news to come. Stay with us. Over on the East Coast, sunshine and -1 for Halifax, snowy and -4 in Charlottetown. Nain +1, Kuujjuaq -2, mix of sun and cloud. Saguenay, sunshine and -11, Val-d'Or, snowy and -20. London, sunshine and -7 there, Sault Ste. Marie -19. Elliott Lake, sunshine and -21, Big Trout Lake -23. Churchill, snowy and -20, Puckatawagan -5. Sunshine and -6 for Dauphin, Winnipeg -14. Estevan -6, mostly sunny there, Swift Current 0 degrees. Stony Rapids -6 and La Ronge -3. Sunshine and -9 for High Levels, snowy and -6 in Peace River. Snowy and 7 degrees in Calgary, Lethbridge +5. Penticton, mostly sunny, 3 degrees there, Kamloops +1. Prince George, rainy and 2 degrees there, Smithers +4. Watson Lake -15, Dawson, mostly sunny and -10. Wrigley, snowy and -17, Trout Lake +7. Colville Lake, mostly sunny, -19 there, Paulatuck -22. Now to a story about a young woman who's bringing Indigenous leadership to a national stage. She's doing it at a pageant, but as CTV's Anna McMillan shows us, it's not your typical one.
Okay, so this drum is the first one I've ever painted.
An ode to Doreen Scow's First Nations culture, which she wants to elevate.
I didn't have anyone to point at the TV and say, hey, that girl looks just like me.
The 22-year-old recently got an email saying she has a chance to change that.
I'm like, oh my goodness, is this what I think it is? All I read was, congratulations, Doreen. And I knew that this opportunity was meant for me.
She's been accepted as a contestant in Miss Indigenous Canada, putting her on a national stage this summer.
This pageant is about lifting Indigenous women up. It's not based on looks. It's about what you do right here, right now in the community. This is the vest that I made.
She and 20 other women from across the country are being scored on an interview, personal essay, and cultural performance. The potentially dancing or singing. For Scow.
I want to highlight the excellence that comes from my community.
She grew up in Victoria and is Kwakwaka'wakw with family ties through the Alert Bay and Campbell River areas.
I wanted to put a little spotlight on my nation, on my people.
Scow is VP of the Indigenous Students Association at her university in Toronto and works for a research project focused on poverty in 2S LGBTQ+ youth.
She's very she sees something and she's like, oh, I can do that. I'm going to do that.
Natasha Parrish is one of Doreen's former Indigenous education teachers.
Many of our societies are matrilineal, which is like the women, they hold the knowledge and they carry that information forward. And so showcasing that is really a neat part of the whole experience.
An experience Scow will undertake in Ontario come July.
I want little girls back home to be like, hey, I know her. I want to be like her someday.
Anna McMillan, CTV News, Langford.
Imagine taking a helicopter ride through some of Western Australia's most spectacular landscapes simply by visiting a museum. Guided by traditional owners with a little help from a celebrity, a new virtual reality experience is giving audiences in Borloo, Perth a trip to remember. NITV's Kieran Cox went along for the ride.
Welcome to one of the most spectacular and pristine landscapes in the world.
Luke Hemsworth introduces a virtual reality ride of a lifetime through the Kimberley. Headsets provide 360-degree views, and traditional owners provide insights into places rarely seen.
The art that you see on the face of the rocks, it's not just art to us. It is life.
So we can't date the pigments of these paintings directly.
The film's producers were guided on country by traditional owners at each location.
I told them where not to go, just listen to me, do not take things, leave it there, and have a look.
It's not just my story, but it's all our story.
Produced over many years, the collaboration with community was paramount.
We wanted to do it with community, so from the start it was us really just going out, listening, saying, hey, here's an opportunity to use modern technology to tell really important stories. We actually call it story living rather than storytelling.
Commissioned for the Perth Festival, the Great Kimberley Wilderness will travel to the National Museum before heading to New Zealand.
Sharing my culture to the world. It's not like we're keeping it to ourselves, because we was always hiding behind the darkness. Now we gotta enter the light now and show every people around the world.
I hope my family are proud of me, and we just keep passing the knowledge on for the country. Yeah.
Modern technology telling ancient stories. Karen Cox, NITV News.
And that's all for your daytime newscast for this Wednesday, January 8th. We'll be back again with more stories tonight on your APTN National News Evening Newscast. Make sure to join us then. I'm Savannah Kelly. Marcy Miigwech, thank you for joining us.